Hi, my name is Christina Lee, and I am a mandala artist, an autistic advocate, a wife, a mom, a cat lover. Today, I'm going to be doing a tutorial teaching you guys how to do this particular piece, this mandala. It's on a 10 by 10 canvas, and we're being so naughty. Before we get started, I wanted to invite you guys to subscribe to my channel, and also I'm placing a link below to a Facebook group where it's other dotting enthusiasts. It's called Christina Lee Meditation Sharing Enthusiasts. You can come share your artwork, you can learn from others. I do Facebook Lives, so if you ever have a question about a paint or a dotting technique, a tool, whatever it is that you've got questions about. I don't know everything, but I certainly love to jump in and try to figure it out. So anyways, I encourage you guys to join that group, and they are the ones that inspired me to do this color challenge, which is for the month of November. And we're doing holiday colors, so we can kind of get geared up, and I'm going to be doing other projects in this color palette. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this. Okay, so first, before we get started, I wanted to show you guys all the tools I'm using. If you don't have these, I am putting a link in the description below to my website where I list all my favorite tools, so you can go there and check them out. First one is the watercolor pencils. I use these instead of the white chalk pencils because I've found that using white chalk is really hard to erase. The second thing you guys are going to need is a stencil. You don't have to use a stencil. I prefer using stencils because for me it's a lot easier to use these than to use a compass. This is a 16 section stencil. If you don't have the 10 by 10, I think they're selling them on Amazon 8 by 8s right now. And this is a smaller one. You can at least get the vertical lines or the big lines coming out, and then you can take one of these, and they're just a ½ inch. These are just a ½ inch apart, so every ½ inch just draw a circle. The next thing you're going to want to get, if you don't have it already, is gesso. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive than black paint, but you're going to get your return on this a million times more. Okay, not a million, but the gesso goes longer, it preps your canvas, and it works better overall as far as working with painting on top of it. And the next thing you're going to need is a ruler. So let's talk about dotting tools. There's two different sets that I use. The DIY Mandala Stone, also listed on my website. I love these, they're lightweight, they're my favorite. I learned with these, so it's just something that I really love and adore. And they're easy to reference too, so that's a big help. And then also these, I'm missing one. They're called Beaute Galleria, and there's a total of 5 tools. I've got 4 here. I've color coded the tips of them, and I'm gonna leave in the description below the different sizes of these, explaining the millimeters of them, but that's there and also listed on my website. And then I call this a micro dotter, but it's an embossing tool for sewing, and it's got the teeniest, tiniest little tiny dot ball thing on the end of that. I'm not going to use it a whole lot in this piece, so it's not really necessary. In fact, you can probably, if you've got this set, you could probably just use this guy, because I use it to drag a dot out a little, I think, and that's about it, and then popping dots. I think that's about it. We're gonna go ahead and jump into the video and get started, and I hope you enjoy. We're gonna start off with a color selection. This is Folk Art Color Shift, Raspberry Flash, and Red Flash. I love Color Shift. We're gonna talk about that more later. The Deco Art Dazzling Metallics, Mink Flash, White Pearl, Splendid Gold, it's one of my favorite colors of gold, Peacock Pearl, lovely color, one of my favorites, Black Pearl, very seductive, and Festive Green. So to get started, you need to take your ruler and a watercolor pencil and divide it in half at the 5-inch mark. Put 2 lines, and you're just going to draw a straight line. This is just a guide for your stencil. It's also going to be part of the grid too, so I want to make sure that's pretty center. And then just go from the center dot, center line, and just draw diagonally out to the corners. That'll give you your sections there. And then take your stencil, line them up, and just draw on the rest of those lines there, including the little circle areas. So we're going to get started right away. This is the dazzling white pearl, and then we're going to come in with the peacock pearl. And you want to make sure that the dots are super close, but they're not touching. So you're wanting to make sure to eyeball that so you're not kind of overflowing there. Sometimes people will do the cross section and then the X section. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Next time I do a painting, I'll show you. And this is the white pearl again. So the white pearl, you saw me do it with the center dot. I flatten it out with a nail stylus just like this because I'm going to be doing a top dot on top of it, and I don't want any texture below that. So we're just going to let that hang out and dry for a while. And that red flash, actually the raspberry flash, it's an interesting color. When it dries, it kind of shifts into a much more brown color, which I really like because, at least for this color palette, I wanted to do something much more muted. And while this is a beautiful, shiny, flashy color, get it, flash? It's a much more muted kind of festive color to me. And it worked really well with the other colors. Really sorry about the blurriness. It gets better. It's a little blurry at the very beginning of the video, but you see I'm taking the smallest nail stylus and dropping in gold dots in between each of the blue ones just to fill that space in a little bit. And then that festive green. The contrasting colors are really nice. I love this. And I promise the blurriness does get better. This is the mink pearl. Just placing 2 dots in between there to fill that space in. We're gonna draw a nice little line out there, just dragging that dot. And when you're dragging this, you want to drag it to kind of the same spot. So really focus your putting the same amount of paint on your tool each time you are going to drag it. And at this point with the black dots there, I feel like it's just kind of like it's going to be a pedestal for another dot above it. So it's kind of giving me a platform for what's about to come. It's fun to think about these things. Okay, what do we got here? This is the red flash. Okay, so let's talk about the stringiness of this paint. If you can develop the patience to use it, it will pay off big time. It's very stringy, and the more of the paint you use out of the bottle, the stringier it gets. But the reason why I like it is because you can really build up a dot with this stuff, and it'll settle out very dome-like and very beautiful. So it takes a little while to get used to, and you cannot go fast with this. Like when you're walking dots, you really have to have patience, or else that string is just going to drag into the canvas. So walking the dots, you can see I'm going up on one side and down on the other. I was doing a Facebook Live there, that's what I was doing. And I do this because it's easier for me to see where I'm going when I do this side. I'm left-handed, so if you're right-handed, you might, you know, try the other direction that way. Whatever works best for you to get those dots down. So when I'm painting, I'm trying to sort of rotate colors so they're not next to each other, but also thinking about the light or the energy it's putting off. And so, like, for instance, having a really light color next to a dark color, it's going to make the canvas pop more, and it's also going to help move the eye around the canvas too. So that's just my style. Everybody's got their own style, and if you're new to painting, you know, it's something to try, and you kind of figure out what works for you. When I first started, I did a lot of paintings where I did base dots of all white, and then I did top dots on every single dot of color, and it was a really interesting exercise in doing that, and I was really trying to understand how color was working with, you know, the white and the black background and also the color next to each other. And it was good for me to kind of learn that and understand what was going on with the color. And now I really like to incorporate the white base on some of the larger dots. That seems to be my, I don't know, my aesthetic right now. It's constantly evolving and changing. And so, you know, who's to say, like, in a year or two, I won't be using white at all anymore? I don't know. You can't really ever say. But it's fun to kind of be fluid with this process and play with things and see where you end up. But here with all this white, the big white dots, it starts to get a little bit tricky in trying to figure out which colors you want to use where, because I'm not really entirely sure what colors I'm going to be putting on these white dots yet. So at a certain point, I get to needing to fill those white dots in. So you're going to have to step away from the painting for a while and let those dry, and then you can put your top dots. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a little bit, but the image kind of gets a little distorted in a sense that all you see is basically white. Oh look, it looks so much better now. Isn't that nice? So you can see a little more of the detail, how I really try to stagger the paints. None of the colors basically are next to each other, like the black is down below a row. You can the green too, and the peacock blue really stands out, so you have to be very careful with some of those really bright colors and just look at only those colors on the canvas if you can, like train your eye to just see that. And if it's got more in a certain part of the canvas and less on another part, just think about what that's doing with your eye and how that travels around the canvas. But this is, you can tell, it is the color shift. And look at those strings. It's insane. But I'm doing it, I believe I'm doing it in regular, this isn't sped up. And I wanted to show you just how much patience I have putting this paint on here, and I am really loading this up. I'll show you this more as we get along with the color shift, but basically I start with the nail stylus or the dotting tool, and I spread the paint out to the border that I wanted on top of the white dot, and then I load it up because it's really not going to, this type of paint is so thick, it's not going to go past that border. And you can kind of, put pressure on it and make it the shape you want it. I notice a lot of newer artists, they aren't really putting a lot of shape to their dots, and I think the texture of the dots are just as important as the color and the placement of them. So that's why you see me kind of coming back and dotting again, putting more paint on those dots. And I screwed up a little there. Just take a little wet Q-tip and scoop that up and wipe it off. You want to make sure that's dry because it will definitely bleed if it's still wet. But I'm really focused. My first dot is really focused on spreading that paint out, not the shape. And then the rest of applying more paint is all about the shape and making sure I'm getting the shape of that dot that I want. Hi. Yeah. So you can see the energy of this painting has shifted dramatically with the white almost disappearing. It's just that little tiny rim left, and the white makes it magical. It does something to the painting that you can't really achieve if you were to just place a green dot there. And I don't like to show a lot of the white because I think of it more like a frame. I am framing that dot, that green paint there, and just kind of showcasing it. So that's what I use the white for, is to really showcase the color that is going on top of it. Okay, so now we're gonna come back in and do some more white dots, because I feel like at this point we've got the style and the energy of the painting set. And so now we can come in, clean up our messes, and try that again. But basically it's set, and so now we just try to recreate that in the rest of the painting. So it's really important when you're placing your dots, you're placing them in the same place on the grid and not necessarily where your dots are that are already placed down. And the reason why you want to do this is because it's inevitable. You're hand making something, it's going to be off just a little bit. But if you focus and stay on the grid, you like how that just totally skipped over. I'm still learning how to use my camera. Anyways, I digress. If you focus on the grid and not the other dots around it, your painting is going to come out much more symmetrical, and it won't have the motion or the fluidness that if you wouldn't use a grid. Like, some people don't use a grid and they've gotten really good at being able to kind of eyeball it, and that is definitely a skill that you can practice and master, and people do it really well. I just like to use the grid because I really like the look of it. Yeah, it kind of, I don't know, it's something that's very pleasing and, what's the word? Meditational? Is that a word? It provides meditation for me to be able to sort of not focus on my thoughts or anything, but focus on the grid and focus on getting those dots in the same place every time. So, when you're focusing just on that one dot, it's really nice to be able to, what am I trying to say? Be able to step back and see the whole thing kind of come together. It's really neat. So I'm walking dots here, and I like to step my tools down, especially if I'm walking larger dots, because each dot is really important. And you want them to have the same or very similar shape on every element that you do. And so if you try to walk a large tool, it becomes really difficult to get the consistency that you're looking for. So usually when I get down to, like you just saw in the previous row, usually when you get down to like the last 3 or 4 dots, you're good to go to use the tool and just kind of go for it. Air bubbles are my nemesis. I try to pop as many as I can as I go. Okay, we're a little bit blurry, but I wanted to show you guys the stringy nature of this paint. And you see, like, when I am done with putting paint on top, it still has this kind of funny shape, but that paint will flatten out to almost a perfect dome shape. That's what I really love about the color shift. It really flattens out and it looks really nice. So you gotta kind of trust it to let it do its thing and level out. I feel like these little tiny dots just add a little bit of sparkle. So fun. It does the same thing, these white dots, the little dots like that, it does the same thing as the larger white dots. It just adds a little bit of visual interest in framing that red dot. And especially on the smaller dots, it's, I don't know, it's a way to kind of break the canvas a little bit. And the black next to the white with the red, it's just divine. It's so wonderful. I also like to keep negative space on the canvas too. Like, you can come in and fill these with these little spaces with a lot of little dots, but I feel like that would be too much. And this kind of really helps balance out the negative space and the color. So here I'm just, I'm kind of framing and setting up the next section, filling that spot in. And the same with here, I'm getting ready to, it's almost like a pedestal. We're gonna put something on that pedestal. Putting these two dots here. So when you put the three dots here together, it's almost like an element of the design. And you can kind of think about that. I don't know, at least with my the work that I do, I think of the different elements and how much of a color I want to bring into the space and what shape I want it to be, because it kind of is pointing out and also sort of wrapping itself around the piece too. Again, I'm shifting back and forth between walking down and walking up, whatever is easiest for you to see. So this was an interesting little spot here. I didn't want to put a colored dot, like green or something. I felt like it would have been too heavy. And putting the gold here in these three dots, I love threes. It's like my favorite. And it feels like it really supports that larger green dot and holds it in place, holds it up. And that's how I do a lot of my mandala painting, is seeing how I can support the other dots. I believe this is the last of the white dots, the big white dots, except for the corners. And if you notice, we start in the center with that big fat red dot. And then I'm just specifically talking about the white dots and what we use to dot on top of it. And the center's got the red, very bright, vibrant, the blue, then the green. And as I was working out, I didn't want the white dots, as they get larger, to have massive amounts of color on it. So that is why I went to the more neutral colors, like the gold and the mink that you'll see coming up. So this is a blunt departure, but this is just how my life rolls. I was talking about my white dots, and then my children come in because they're hungry. And so I had to back off. I had to stop the recording, and now I totally lost my concentration. And then I recorded the rest of the video, but I had my microphone on mute. So everything I just said went out into the ether, and it is forevermore gone. But I do remember I did talk about the raspberry flash there, dragging those dots, and a little bit of a tip. At the beginning of the video, I showed the tool, the micro dotter, or the embossing tool. It's got that little tiny tip on there. Dragging dots is difficult to kit if you're doing it all the way around the canvas. It's really hard to get it to stop at the same place because your tool picks up different amounts of paint every time, so you're going to get slightly different lengths, and sometimes they're just way shorter or way longer than you expected. If they're shorter, having that micro dotter, that's just what I call it, the embossing tool, to drag that out to the length that you want, it's really going to help make those even out much better. So that's just a little tip about the micro dotter. Here I'm demonstrating the stringiness of the color shift paint and how much time it takes to actually do these. And I really like this paint because of its stringiness. You gotta play with it. You gotta really focus on it, get it to the shape that you want, and it pays off big time. The color, the shift, the texture once it's dry, it's so wonderful. So that's why I use it. I know a lot of people get frustrated with it, but it just takes patience and time to learn it. And it's really great. So here with these little dots, I'm just kind of finishing everything off. Wanting it to look nice, kind of a little bedazzling sparkle at the tips there. Like holiday times, very festive, sparkly, twinkling lights everywhere. It's kind of the feel that I was going for. And then the corners. Let's talk about the corners a little bit, because I've heard a couple of different schools of thought of, well, one in particular, about putting corners on a mandala. And the idea is that you don't want to put corners on a mandala because it's blocking the energy flow. And I can understand that point of view. However, if you're using a square canvas, there's a lot of leftover empty space in those corners, and so it always kind of, like, energetically it felt off to me. And so depending on the size of the canvas, depending on the shape of the mandala, how large it is, how far, the edges reach, I feel like most of the time it does warrant a little corner. And just bringing the color out to the edge there, just to frame it in really nicely, I think it works really well. And energetically, I don't think it interrupts anything. If you're concerned about interrupting energy in a mandala, then do it on something round, and that'll solve the problem. It's hard to put something round on a square canvas, and I feel like corners kind of solve that issue. But I also do mandalas on records, and I still do borders on records, but you don't have to. And records are perfect, like, you know, rescuing records from the garbage, or, you know, old records, they're gonna have scratches, and otherwise, what else are you gonna use them for? So, to me, it's like the perfect way. If you're gonna do something round, do a record. Maybe I'll do another one of those at some point. That would be really nice. So, anyways, that's just my 2 cents. I think energetically, a round mandala on a square canvas with corners is perfect. And I try to use all the colors that I have in my color palette in the corners, so it's a little tricky. I try to balance the colors out as far as, you know, something heavy like this raspberry red. If I were to go in with a lot of that color, it's gonna draw your eye to the edge and kind of hang out there a little too long. So that's why I make the dots really small and kind of have its own place and a little sparkly. And I think it works pretty well. It's interesting, the red color and then the raspberry color, they have such different weights. The red, it's much lighter, and the raspberry is a heavier, even though they're both kind of in the red zone. So, I don't know, color is very sensitive to color. Like the weight of it, how much light it's putting off, the reflectivity. And I think that's why I like working with metallics so much, is because they speak to me in a way that most other kinds of paints, just like a satin paint, I don't know, they all kind of have the same energetic feel to me. So, I don't know, I probably will always work with metallics. You see, I'm basically scooping the paint out of my tray. It looks like I need some more. I'm trying to stretch it though, I think. Anyways, we're about done here. I'm just gonna wrap this up and say thanks for watching, and make sure you guys subscribe. And if you do decide to paint this piece, I would love to see it. If you could join my Facebook group and post it in there, I would be thrilled. So it's always fun to share with other people too. Anyways, I'm gonna let you go, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you'd like to see more, comment below and let me know. Thanks a lot.